Today we're taking a look at osmosis. It goes really well with our topic yesterday, which was diffusion. So osmosis is, very specifically, the diffusion of water. So we have a selectively permeable membrane, remember that from yesterday. It allows for the diffusion of water, but not for the diffusion of other solute particles. The water is going to diffuse, and this happens even against gravity. And this is what we call osmosis. So here we have a picture. So you can tell that we have a high concentration on the right. So there's the solute particles, looks like the sugar that we had yesterday. And on the left, we have no concentration. So we could definitely say that the right side is hypertonic to the left side. Down the middle, we have a selectively permeable membrane that doesn't allow for these red and white solute particles to travel between. It is small enough, however, for the water molecules to travel through. So in order to equal out the concentrations, water will diffuse from the hypotonic solution to the hypertonic solution, from the side of low concentration to the high concentration, in an attempt to equal out the concentrations. So we see that happening here. And yes, again, it does happen even against gravity, which is what you see here in just a second. This side moves up, this side goes lower. It looks really weird if you ever see one of these, and they do exist. There are osmosis tubes that you can see this defiance of gravity because of osmosis. So if you think about our cells, water is able to diffuse through the membrane, through those aquaporons we talked about. This happens freely. Water could go into the cell, water could come out of the cell at will. We can't stop water from going in or out. For that reason, cells have to make sure that they are isotonic to their surroundings. They have an equal concentration to their surroundings. Otherwise, you're going to get some pretty drastic and probably deadly results. So let's take a look at what would happen if a cell is in some of these different environments. So first we have a cell in a hypotonic environment. So here's the cell, it's got some solute particles inside of it, and it's got more solute particles on the inside than it does on the outside. So this cell is hypertonic to its environment. It is in a hypotonic environment. When this is the case, water is going to move into the cell. It's going to result in the cell getting larger, expanding, and eventually it's going to burst, it's going to pop. And that's what happens to a cell in a hypotonic solution. Not a good scenario for a cell. Bursting means death. Now a special note here, this is not true of plant cells. We haven't talked much about the parts of cells, but when we do, and hopefully you've heard in prior classes perhaps, plant cells have cell walls, which is like the wall of a classroom, surrounding that cell membrane. So that cell membrane, that cell itself, can't get too big in a plant cell because of the walls around them. So plant cells do not burst in a hypotonic environment. In fact, plant cells actually enjoy a hypotonic environment and try to be in a hypotonic environment. It's one of the ways that they're able to move water up against gravity, from the roots of the tree all the way to the very tip top. That's against gravity, and it's through a hypotonic environment that plant cells are able to accomplish that. So it's bad for animal cells to be in a hypotonic environment. You see here, this is why. How about a hypertonic environment? So here's the same cell, and we've got the solute particles on the inside. And now, on the outside, we have a hypertonic environment. A lot more particles on the outside than on the inside. It's a lot higher concentration on the outside of the cell than it is on the inside. So in this scenario, the water is going to move out of the cell. This will result in the cell shrinking. It'll get smaller because it's losing water. And eventually, it's going to shrivel up and probably die. So again, another bad scenario here. You want to make sure your cells are not in a hypertonic solution either. Hypertonic is bad for all cells, plants and animals. The cell wall will stop the cell from getting too big, but it can't stop the cell from getting too small. So plant cells and animal cells both suffer from a hypertonic environment. So it's for this reason that cells spend a lot of energy trying to remain isotonic with their environments. That is, equal on the inside as the outside. Again, if they're in a hypotonic solution, the water's going to rush in, the cell's going to expand, and eventually it'll probably pop. If it's in a hypertonic solution, the water's going to rush out, the cell's going to shrivel, and probably die that way too. So cells actually do a lot of work making sure that they are maintained in an isotonic solution. And this is another example of homeostasis, where cells are maintaining stable internal conditions, a very key characteristic of life.